Don't bother speaking at the table, you've got nothing worth saying, my father muttered, his eyes fixed on my brother while he slid the check across the polished wood. $100,000. My brother's grin stretched wide, proud, as if he had earned it, not simply inherited it. And me? I sat there with my fork still hovering mid-air, the words my father had spit earlier, "You're the worthless," still echoing, still burning like a brand pressed into skin. Hi everyone, my name is Seraphine Duskwood, and I was 26 when I discovered that my bloodline could cut deeper than any knife. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just studied the way the chandelier light caught my father's cufflinks, gold and immaculate, as though they were forged to reflect only my brother. 4 years, I had been the ghost in the room, watching him stumble, watching them cushion every fall. My small victories were invisible. His failures? They were repackaged into family pride. Tonight wasn't a surprise. It was a confirmation. The betrayal wasn't loud. It was insidious. It lived in silence. The silence when I asked for help with tuition and got lectures instead. The silence when I worked double shifts and still got mocked for not doing enough. Tonight was just the headline act in a story I had always known. I was the expendable one. I remember the soundscape with cruel detail, the pen scratching across the check, the scrape of chairs as they stood, my brother's laughter bouncing like broken glass inside my skull. My hands trembled, not from weakness, but from a seed taking root, a seed named revenge. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't beg. I stepped into the cold winter air, snow crunching under my boots, and whispered to the night, "They will never hear from me again." And for 2 years, they didn't. 2 years of silence. 2 years of rebuilding from ashes. 2 years of turning worthless into something they would never comprehend. Until headlights tore through the dark, halting on the gravel drive of my land. My brother's voice, panicked, desperate, broke the stillness. "Dad, you need to come here right now." The silence I had guarded so fiercely had finally shattered. The night my brother's car skidded onto my property, I stood on the porch with my arms crossed, the cold air curling around me like smoke. The gravel crunched under his tires as he jumped out, pacing in frantic circles, phone clutched to his ear. "Dad, you don't get it. You need to see this place." His voice cracked, half awe, half panic. I didn't speak. I let him rant. Because what he saw rising behind me wasn't the ghost of the girl they once called worthless. It was the proof of every hour I worked, every callous, every sleepless night they never knew about. Where once lay an empty stretch of scrubland now stood a sprawling property, timber walls glowing in the moonlight, acres of fenced pasture rolling like dark waves, the quiet hum of machinery I had invested in. A place built not from charity, but from defiance. 2 years ago, I left that dinner table and disappeared into grit. I sold everything I owned except my will. I waitressed, I cleaned motel rooms, I picked up contracts no one else wanted. Every cent was poured into this land, every setback sharpened me. And when the chance came, when a foreclosure notice landed on a forgotten ranch, I bought it with cash I'd bled for. And I turned it into something alive. Now, under the silver light, my brother's disbelief fed me more than any apology ever could. His eyes darted from the stables to the barns to the long line of equipment. He didn't see just wood and steel, he saw control slipping away. For once, he couldn't laugh me off, couldn't reduce me to an afterthought. "How the hell did you do this?" he finally spat, his voice trembling. I only smiled faintly, leaning against the railing. "By being worthless, remember." The silence that followed was heavier than stone. For the first time, I watched my brother struggle to form words, and fail. His empire of arrogance was cracking, and he didn't even know the half of it. Because this was only the beginning. My brother's face twisted under the porch light, a mix of confusion and rage. He looked at me the way a gambler looks at a rigged deck, like the game he thought he owned had betrayed him. You can't afford this," he stammered, his voice breaking against the night air. "You've got nothing. You're no one." I let the words hang there, unchallenged, until he grew uneasy at his own echo. Then I stepped forward, boots crunching on the gravel, my shadow stretching long across the yard. "No one." My voice was calm, almost gentle. "Then who built all this while you were burning through Dad's money?" The color drained from his face. He hated being reminded of the truth, that his business, the one Dad had invested a fortune into, had failed within 18 months. I didn't need to read the newspapers or hear the rumors. His nervous eyes told me everything. "Shut up," he hissed, lowering his phone. "You don't understand. It's complicated." Complicated. That word. It was always his shield. His losses weren't failures, they were complications. His lies weren't betrayals, they were misunderstandings. And Dad? He bought every excuse, wrote every check. I leaned against the railing, my arms folding across my chest. "You're right," I whispered. "I don't understand. Because when I fell, nobody caught me. And when you fell, the whole family threw you a net woven with gold." He clenched his jaw, his teeth grinding. For the first time, I saw it, the fear behind his bravado. He looked at the property again, his eyes narrowing, as though it threatened him simply by existing. And then his phone buzzed. "Dad." I saw the name flash across the screen before he answered, turning away, lowering his voice. But his whisper wasn't soft enough. "Dad, it's not good. She's got land, equipment, it's bigger than what we ever planned. You need to see it before it's too late." Too late. The words rolled into me like thunder. He wasn't just shaken, he was afraid. And in that moment, I realized, the cracks weren't just spreading in him. They were spreading in the family, too. The following afternoon, I heard the sound before I saw them, 3 cars pulling onto the gravel drive, engines rumbling like a storm coming to claim what it thought belonged to it. My father stepped out first, his coat sharp as ever, his expression colder than the October wind. My mother trailed behind, her silence stitched with disapproval. And then my brother, smirking now, as if their arrival was proof that reinforcements had come to put me back in my place. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The property stood behind me, vast and undeniable, a fortress of sweat and sacrifice. My father's gaze flickered across it, and though he tried to mask it, I caught the glint, surprise, maybe even respect, but buried fast beneath disdain. "So this is where you've been hiding," he said, his voice smooth, rehearsed. "Playing farmer while your brother and I were working in the real world." I didn't flinch. Funny. From where I'm standing, the real world looks a lot like unpaid debts and failed ventures. My brother's smirk faltered. My father's jaw tightened. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the restless shuffling of my mother's hands. Then he took a step forward, lowering his voice as though speaking to a disobedient child. "You've made your point. But let's be realistic. You don't have the experience to manage all this. You'll burn out. You'll fail. And when you do, this land will go to waste. Better to fold it into something useful. Into family hands." Family hands. The same hands that once shoved me away from the table. I met his gaze evenly. "When you called me worthless, did you imagine I'd still build something worth more than your son's empire of excuses?" The words landed sharp. My brother shifted uncomfortably, but my father stood rooted, his pride warring with disbelief. For the first time, I saw it, the flicker of fear. Not just of losing control, but of realizing the child he discarded no longer needed him. And that terrified him more than failure ever could. My father's silence stretched across the yard like a blade. His eyes roamed the stables, the barn, the pastures, each detail carving a deeper line across his forehead. My brother hovered close to him, like a shadow that had lost its own form, waiting for his next command. Finally, my father exhaled. "You think this is success? This is a phase. A facade. You can't sustain it." I tilted my head, almost amused. "Strange. You never asked how I built it. Doesn't curiosity run in your bloodline, or do you only count dollars when my brother spends them?" That hit harder than I expected. His nostrils flared, his hands tightening around the leather gloves he carried. And then, like a mask slipping, he revealed the part he meant to keep hidden. "Your brother came to me last month. The business, it drained everything. The banks are circling. Creditors calling. He's buried in loans. I had to bail him out again." The words hung in the air, heavy, damning. I turned to my brother. His face betrayed him before his mouth could form excuses. Panic. Shame. Rage. He lunged forward. "She doesn't need to know that." But I did know. I knew more than he imagined. Because while they believed I had vanished into obscurity, I had been watching. I'd heard whispers in town, seen notices pinned in court offices. I knew his empire was a hollow husk, bleeding money faster than he could cover. And now, here he was, standing on land I owned, trying to pretend the ground wasn't shifting beneath his feet. I stepped closer, my voice low, steady, deliberate. Every check you wrote him, every bailout you handed over, it wasn't an investment. It was a leash. And he let you drag him by the neck. Me? I cut mine the night you called me worthless. My father's jaw locked. My brother's fists curled, his knuckles white. For the first time in my life, I wasn't on their side of the table. I was the table itself, and they had nothing left to stand on. My father's voice dropped into the tone I remembered from childhood, the tone that silenced rooms, that made my mother shrink and my brother feel powerful. Enough games, he said. This land isn't really yours. Not in any lasting sense. You'll trip eventually, and when you do, the banks, the taxes, the upkeep, it'll swallow you whole. Best to sign it over now. Keep it in the family. We'll manage it properly. The arrogance was staggering. He looked at me as though I was still that girl at the dinner table, too small to speak. My brother smirked again, emboldened by his father's authority, and stepped closer, already certain victory was in reach. But I didn't back away. Instead, I held his gaze with a stillness I'd earned through every sleepless night building this place. Funny thing about family, I murmured. When you closed the door on me, I stopped owing you anything. My father's lips thinned, his patience unraveling. Do you know what happens to people like you? You think you've won, but you'll collapse. And when you do, don't expect us to pick up the pieces. The words slid over me like water. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that every piece of this land was already protected. Every deed, every title, every contract had my name inked across it. I had made sure. You don't have the power to take what isn't yours, I said evenly. And you certainly don't have the right. My brother scoffed. You think paperwork will stop us? Dad's connected. He can bury you with a phone call. But as his words spilled out, I smiled. A smile he didn't understand. A smile that came from the folder locked in my office drawer, filled with documents, proof, receipts of every debt they owed and every lie they told. The time for silence was almost over. I wouldn't test me if I were you, I whispered. Because the day you called me worthless, you made me dangerous. For the first time, I saw my father falter. Just slightly. But enough. The air between us was brittle, ready to shatter. My father's glare cut sharp as glass, but behind it I saw something new, a flicker of doubt, the smallest fracture in the armor he'd worn my whole life. My brother, though, couldn't hold still. His fists clenched, his chest heaved, his words poured like venom. You think you're better than me? You think this ranch, makes you more than the failure you've always been? His voice cracked, echoing off the timber beams. You're nothing without us. The outburst startled even my mother, who tugged at his sleeve, whispering his name. But he ripped away, pointing at the barns, the stables, the acres rolling behind me. She stole this chance. This should have been mine. And there it was, the truth, ugly and raw. He didn't want the land because he believed in it. He wanted it because it was proof he'd lost. I stepped closer, my boots steady on the gravel, until I was close enough to see the sweat trembling on his forehead. I didn't steal anything, I said softly. I worked. Something you've never done without a hand outstretched. His face twisted. Rage boiled over. He lunged toward me, his voice tearing through the air. I'll destroy this place before I let you keep it. But before his hand could so much as brush me, my father barked his name. A command, sharp and final. My brother froze mid-motion, his chest heaving, his knuckles white. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. My father's eyes shifted between us, calculation flickering behind his stern facade. For the first time, I realized he wasn't just afraid of losing control over me, he was afraid of his son unraveling in front of him. And in that unraveling, something became clear. They weren't here to claim what I had built. They were here because they needed saving. I turned, walked back toward the porch, and spoke without looking over my shoulder. I told you 2 years ago, you'd never hear from me again. That silence was mercy. But mercy runs out. Their empire wasn't collapsing because of me. It was collapsing because it was hollow. I reached the porch steps and paused, the winter wind carrying the weight of everything unsaid. Behind me, my brother seethed, trembling on the edge of violence, while my father stood silent, finally realizing the one thing he'd spent his life denying: he no longer had control. I turned slowly, my eyes sweeping across them both. 2 years ago, you called me worthless, I said, my voice calm, steady. And you believed it. But do you see what worthless built? The barns stood tall in the moonlight, the pastures stretching into the dark, the hum of life born from my labor. Every acre was proof, every plank of wood a testimony that I had forged myself without them. My mother's lips trembled, but she said nothing. My father, proud even in defeat, tried one last strike. Blood is blood. You can't erase us. I let the words hang, then shook my head. I don't need to erase you. You erased me the moment you chose him over me. I only learned to live without the weight. I walked to the railing, running my hand over the grain of the wood I had sanded myself. My brother muttered curses under his breath, but they no longer touched me. His empire had collapsed, his excuses stripped bare. My father's authority had cracked, his words suddenly empty. Leave, I said finally, quiet but absolute. This land is mine. My life is mine. And the only thing you'll inherit from me is silence. For a moment, they didn't move. But then, as if pulled by an invisible thread, they turned back toward their cars. My brother shouted something I didn't catch. My father didn't look back at all. I stood there until their taillights disappeared into the night. And then, for the first time in years, I exhaled, not with anger, not with grief, but with peace. The world had called me worthless. Yet here I was, surrounded by proof that worth is not given, it's built. I closed my eyes, the night air cool on my face, and whispered a single word that sealed everything behind me.